everybody, it's Greg here, and I was doing some maintenance on this 2016 Mazda CX-9, one of the first ones. We actually bought it in 2016, I think it was May or June, so it's actually one of the first ones, and it's got 108,000 miles on it. Now, one of the things that I do monthly is I check the coolant level, and it got me thinking about the coolant leak. You know, the cracked head ruin your engine. Coolant leak. All right. Well, I'm going to try to give you some fact on that and address some of the speculation and try to keep it from being too technical, give you some practical stuff on, I'll have chapters on what it is, what the cause is, does it affect you, how you can know, and what Mazda's doing about it. All right, let's get into it. So what a lot of people refer to as the coolant leak, if you do a search for Mazda coolant leak, you'll find what I'm talking about, and there's a lot of talk on forums and stuff, and oh, my CX-9 or my newer CX-5 or Mazda 6 with this engine. It's the 2.5 liter turbo, and people are all worried about it. Oh, it's terrible, my engine's gonna blow up. So what can happen, and has happened for some people, is that the back of the head here, where the turbo is mounted, the turbo is right there on the exhaust, which the exhaust manifold mounts to the head, and there's a lot of heat and a lot of weight there. And what can happen is the head can crack, and that'll cause coolant to leak. Now that coolant can leak into the engine, into the cylinders, which is really bad. That can cause internal engine damage, to bearings, to rings. Your turbo itself actually can be affected by that. You could get into oil and it cause overheating, cause a lot of problems. I'll tell you how to check for that. And the other thing is, the fluid could leak externally from the head, and that'll lower your coolant. Your coolant gets low enough where the engine's no longer being cooled, it overheats, and that's gonna cause, very similar problems as the coolant leaking inside. It just takes a little longer usually. So there's a lot of speculation on what causes this, and what most people I'm seeing say on the forums and stuff is that it gets hot, it overheats, cracks the head. Well, yes, overheating will definitely crack an aluminum head, or at least warp it, causing coolant leak. Now, unless your engine is overheated, that's probably not actually what's happened. Now, the turbo is pretty heavy. It's mounted on the back of the engine, on that exhaust manifold, which is bolted to the back of that head, and per Mazda's technical service bulletin, which we'll talk about in a minute, what happens is when you hit big enough bumps, it can cause there to be enough stress where it cracks that head. Now, like I said, I'm not going to get too technical here. There's questions about the forming, whether they torque the bolts too tight on some of them, and all that stuff. So I don't want to get too technical in this one. So just know that that is what Mazda says happens. And so if you're, based on that, if you're driving on bumpy, harsh bumpy roads that are going to vibrate that turbo, or knock it real good, you're probably more likely to have this issue. Mine's got 108,000. I've not had the issue, and I've got an early one. So, we'll get into whether you're likely. Well, you know what? Let's get into it now. So based on my research, most of the vehicles that are having the issue, it's happening between 60 and 80,000 miles, right? Warranty was to 50. Oh man, yeah, no, that really does suck, because it ain't cheap. You're looking at $6K if it's actually done some damage. So, it could be more even. So it just depends. But are you likely to have this problem? No, it's actually extremely rare that you have the problem. It's just when you have the problem, it really, really sucks. So don't worry about having the issue too much, because like I said, it is rare, and I'll tell you how to look for it. But you know, you got to consider thousands of these engines are on the road, and there's literally only hundreds, low is based on my research, it's actually low hundreds that have had the issue. Now, Mazda's not releasing numbers, so all I can go by is the actual complaints to the national traffic, I forget what they're called. There's a group that, you know, does the whole recalls and everything, and they haven't had that many complaints. So it's not like a widespread issue. You know, it's not a Chevy 2.6 liter engine, you know, the new one that is junk. Oh, sorry, did I get off topic there? So things to look for. So you really ought to be doing fluid checks, tire pressure checks, that type of thing monthly, at least once a month. You should be checking them. If your coolant level is dropping, that coolant's going somewhere. Now another thing is, after driving it, if you smell a sweet, kind of sickly smell, and that's the coolant burning, and that is, again, somehow you're losing coolant, and it's got that kind of a sweet smell. It's very, very noticeable. So when you, after driving it a bit, you park it, if you smell that sweet smell, that means it is losing a little coolant somewhere. So if you are losing coolant, either the coolant level's dropping, or you smell it, or you see some green fluid down at the bottom section of the engine, you might want to check flashlight and try to see if you can see any. Take it to the dealer, have them inspect it, and they should hopefully be able to tell you where it's coming from. So if you're seeing white smoke when you start it up, cold, stop. Turn it off immediately. You have coolant in your engine. It's going through the engine, and it will wipe out that engine. So don't drive it. Tow it to your mechanic or under warranty, your Mazda dealer, and have them look at it. Also, if it's overheating. If it's overheating and there's not some obvious reason, then that can be same issue. And bubbles in the coolant expansion tank, if you happen to see those bubbles in your coolant, that indicates probably that there's some air getting in there, and that shouldn't happen. So the actual cracked head coolant leak is actually 100 times less likely than the most likely cause, which is your coolant lines on the turbo. Those have little seals, and those can wear where a little bit of coolant seeps out from those lines. That's not the head crack issue. It's much easier to fix and much cheaper. Or Mazda uses, like most of the cars today, a plastic thermostat that can crack and coolant can seep out of it. Or the water pump. The water pump could also be leaking, and that's all of those are relatively cheap compared to the head cracked issue. So don't just assume it's the head crack. That's why you want to get it inspected, see what it actually is. If it is the head crack issue, well, Mazda has agreed to extend the warranty for those affected to 10 years, 120,000 miles. Now, this one is 9.5 years old, has 108,000 miles, so I'm getting near the end of that, but I was one of the first ones also. This is one of the first CX-9s purchased, and it's been great. I shouldn't jinx it like this. Sorry, let me cut that out. Let me cut that out. Now, the TSB, Technical Service Bulletin, is 01-0002/23, because that was from 2/23, and that's just sent to the dealerships. Hey, we got this issue to be aware of because you might see it. Well, then they did the CXP-11. That's the one where the warranty is extended for those affected. And by the way, that does include reimbursement. So if you had this issue and had it fixed, there are limitations. You might be able to get reimbursed for the cost of that. There is no recall on it. It is just the extending of the warranty. And again, it is rare. So, you know, get on the forums and, oh man, hundreds of people have having this problem. Well, if I had to pay $7,000 because the head cracked on my Mazda for something like this, that, you know, I'm not going to say it was a defect, but there may have been a molding issue or something, or a bolt tightened too tight issue on some of the heads. Well, yeah, I'd be pretty upset too, and I'd go on the forums and I'd be complaining too. Now, I always try to do a verse of the video, and this one is going to be Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, when? The beginning of time. God, that's who? That's the force that created the energy, the heaven and the earth. That's your matter. Matter can't create matter. So you can't get something from nothing. Literally, you can. It's laws of physics. And things do not get better. They get worse. All these laws of thermodynamics and all that, they demand that there was a creator, and you can choose to disagree with that, but that's the reason that they're the laws of physics. There aren't exceptions. All right, so I hope this video was helpful, and if so, please like, subscribe, comment, or leave a tip on my coffee page, and God bless. By the way, that is your coolant overflow, and where you would look right here, full and low, monitor that. So over time you may lose a little coolant, and that's completely normal anymore. However, if you notice it going down, definitely worth getting that checked.